of great things happening on earth. I mean, if you think about what astrology is, I'm not involved in it. I don't check my horoscope or anything like that, but there are people that believe that their fate or their lives are influenced by the stars and the zodiac and constellations and planets and all kinds of things. And when they saw this star rising, they believed that something great was going to take place. A star appearing. Now, astronomers today, I guess, debate or argue about exactly what it was that they saw in the sky. Was it a supernova? Was it a congruence of planets and all kinds of things? I'll leave that to them. Whatever it was, it got their attention. And this in their mind said, a king has arisen. Now, these were, again, wise men, and there were Jews that lived in parts of Persia at that time, if you remember back in the Babylonian captivity. So they would have had some knowledge of the Jewish scriptures. And they began to seek to find out what this star might have meant. And they came to the conclusion that the King of the Jews has arisen. These kingmakers are going to go and pay homage to this new king. And you can see then why Herod, when he hears about these magi coming to worship this new king of the Jews, is very troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. Now, there are many Herods in the Bible. If you know anything about George Foreman, I always find that, other than being a fighter, he named all of his boys George. So he was like 6 or 7 Georges in his family. Well, Herod did the same thing. Everybody in Herod's family was named Herod. And all the girls were named Herodians. So, I mean, he really was in love with that name Herod. And the Herod that we find in this particular situation is Herod the Great. Now, he's great because he built a lot of things. In fact, even the temple itself. But I would also say that he is great in his savagely, his brutality. Here was a man that murdered his wife, that murdered his daughter-in-law, and murdered 3 of his sons. So when we read in the scriptures where Herod sends his soldiers to kill every male child 2 years of age and younger, this is right in character with Herod. Any attempt to take his throne from him resulted in the most brutal and bloodthirsty acts you can imagine. You know, the number one priority of being a king is to survive. And anyone that threatens your throne threatens you, and you have to deal with them in their mind in a ruthless way. You kill them. So when the Magi, these kingmakers, these people of the highest part of society come and say, we're here to seek the King of the Jews, you can imagine why Herod was troubled. And when you have 2 kings claiming the throne, often results in civil war, so you can see why all of Jerusalem, all of Judea was troubled by this. Now Herod, interesting, who has the title King of the Jews, he is himself not a Jew. He's an Idumean. He's put into power by Rome, by Augustus Caesar, and supported by Mark Antony and Cleopatra. He is not of the people. He is a usurper. He has no real claim to be the king of the Jews. He's only there because Rome put him there. Rome said, this is your king. And the people hated him. They knew he wasn't one of them. But he had the power. And he had the power of Rome behind him. He was nothing but a puppet king for the Romans. And he did their bidding. But Jesus is of the lineage in the house of David. Now, if the Magi had known this, they wouldn't have stopped by and talked to Herod. They would have gone right to Bethlehem, because in Micah, the prophet Micah, tells us that this shepherd of Israel is going to be born in Bethlehem. And Herod, being the fox that he is, says to the Magi, go and find this child and come back to me so that I might worship him, which is a lie. He doesn't want to worship the King of the Jews. He wants to kill this usurper, this one who threatens his throne, who threatens his power. The Magi go, and they follow the star. And the star stops over this house in Bethlehem. And there they go and they worship this newborn king. By divine revelation, they realize that this is truly the King of the Jews, but he's more than King of the Jews, because it says in the Bible that the Gentiles will come and worship him. Paul says the great mystery that was hidden long ago and is now revealed in Christ Jesus is that the Gentiles are now included into God's covenant of grace. Who would have thunk that this is not just the King of the Jews, but he is the King of the universe.